لو سمحتوا
مساء الخير. أود في البداية أن أرحب بوزير الخارجية الأمريكي جون كيري. تمت اليوم مباحثات مطولة تشرف خلالها وزير الخارجية الأمريكي بلقاء السيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي. كانت فرصة لتناول العلاقات الثنائية بشكل فيه إسهاب وبشكل اتسم بالصراحة والعمق. أيضا تم تناول العديد من القضايا الإقليمية والدولية، سواء كان الأوضاع في العراق أو في سوريا أو في ليبيا، بالإضافة إلى تطورات الوضع فيما يتعلق بتثبيت الهدنة في قطاع غزة. تم أيضا تناول الاجتماع الذي عقد في جدة لتناول قضية الإرهاب والعمل المشترك لمقاومة ظاهرة الإرهاب بصفة عامة، وأيضا فيما يتعلق بانتشار تنظيم داعش في كل من الأراضي العراقية والسورية. كان هناك حديث أيضا على أهمية العلاقة الاستراتيجية التي تجمع الولايات المتحدة ومصر، واتفاق على أهمية استمرار هذه العلاقة وتدعيمها لخدمة مصالح البلدين المشتركة على أساس من الاحترام المتبادل. مكانة الولايات المتحدة كقوة دولية، مكانة مصر كقوة إقليمية، كل لهم تأثيره على المشهد السياسي، وأيضا كل منهم لديه القدرة على التأثير الإيجابي والوصول إلى حلول المناسبة لكثير من القضايا الملحة في المنطقة. المباحثات أيضا تطرقت إلى القضية الفلسطينية باعتبارها القضية المركزية في منطقة الشرق الأوسط، وكان هناك توافق في الآراء أهمية استئناف المفاوضات الفلسطينية الإسرائيلية من أجل إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية على كامل التراب الفلسطيني، وأن يكون عاصمتها القدس الشرقية. هناك اتفاق في الرأي بأن حل هذه المشكلة سوف يترتب عليه تحقيق الاستقرار وإزالة كثير من أسباب التوتر على المستوى الإقليمي والدولي. برحب بالوزير كيري. لي دائما فرصة لتناول كثير من هذه القضايا معه خلال زياراته إلى مصر، وأيضا في خلال الاتصالات التي نجريها بشكل دوري، وأشكره على تعاونه، وأتمنى أن يكون هناك فرص أكيد في المستقبل لمواصلة العمل المشترك من أجل مصلحة البلدين. تفضل.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister Shukri, my friend Sameh. I'm very appreciative for that. I'm very appreciative for the welcome here. And indeed, Prime Minister Shukri and I are constantly in touch with each other, and I think we have a very strong working relationship, which is now defining itself even in more initiatives that we will be working on together. I'm very pleased to be back here in Cairo, and I'm very grateful to Foreign Minister Shukri and President al-Sisi for their invitation to come back here in order to talk about the coalition that we are building to deal with ISIL, but also to deal with a number of other very complicated and important issues in the region, ranging from Gaza, Palestine, to the Iran nuclear negotiations, Libya, and other issues. I had an opportunity to meet this morning also with Secretary General Nabil al-Arabi of the Arab League, and I want to thank the Secretary General for his continued commitment to peace and to security within the Arab world. The relationship that the United States and Egypt share has long been a critical part of the United States relationship with the entire region. And today I reiterated to President al-Sisi and to Foreign Minister Shukri the United States' commitment and desire to see Egypt succeed in the many transitions that it currently faces. We will support Egypt as it undertakes significant economic reforms, as it holds parliamentary elections in the near term, and as it works to follow through on its pledge to protect human rights, which we believe is an essential ingredient of stability. We also pledge to continue to work closely with Egypt to advance our common strategic interests, a number of which were the centerpiece of our discussions here today. I reiterated to President al-Sisi and to Foreign Minister Shukri how appreciative we are of Egypt's leadership in brokering the Gaza ceasefire. And together, our nations and other international partners will continue to discuss the path forward for the two parties to be able to reconvene in Cairo to work through the critical underlying issues that have stood in the way of an enduring ceasefire and frankly have prevented it for too long. We also discussed the clear need to support the elected government next door in Libya. Both Egypt and the United States understand that while our nations must continue to push for a peaceful resolution, ultimately, the Libyan people and their elected representatives are the only ones who can decide that it is time to resolve their conflicts through constructive political dialogue. And we hope they will make that decision as swiftly as possible. What we both know is they had an election, the election had an outcome, and everyone should respect the outcome of that election. Our conversations also focused extensively on our shared fight against terrorism and extremism. Egypt is on the front lines of extremist threats, particularly when it comes to the extremist groups in the Sinai. And that is why, in an effort to support the Egyptian government's work to counter those threats, last month we announced our intention to deliver 10 Apache helicopters to the Egyptian military. The fact is that in today's globalized world, it's only a matter of time before the threat of terrorism anywhere becomes a threat of terrorism everywhere. That has certainly been proven true in the case of ISIL. It is an organization whose brutality and sheer evil knows no bounds. ISIL claims to be fighting on behalf of Islam, but it actually has nothing to do with Islam. It is increasingly clear that its message of hate is rejected by the overwhelming majority of Muslims all around the world. I have heard this loud and clear from leader after leader in Muslim states that I have visited, and it is clear in the pronouncements of religious leaders around the world. In meetings that I have had throughout the region this week, including the conference in Jeddah, where I met with the leaders from Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and the GCC states. And we all met with the sole goal of discussing the global effort to take on ISIL and to continue the fight against terrorism. As an intellectual and cultural capital of the Muslim world, Egypt has a critical role to play in publicly renouncing the ideology that ISIL disseminates. This was a very important feature of our discussions in Jeddah, and again today here in Cairo. And it is something that the Egyptian religious establishments at Al-Azhar and Dar al-Ifta, they both fully support and understand. As President Obama explained earlier this week, we believe the only way to eliminate the ISIL threat is by building a global coalition that will support the Iraqi government across a number of critical efforts, including by providing military support, but also, importantly, because this won't be done by military alone, importantly, humanitarian aid by addressing the illicit funding streams that come to ISIL, by stopping the flow of foreign fighters, which all countries could become engaged in, and by repudiating the gross distortion of Islam that ISIL is spreading to whoever will listen. So we're very grateful that both Egypt and the Arab League have supported this coalition every step of the way. And in each of the meetings that I had today, we discussed how we can better accelerate the efforts in bringing more nations on board and in dividing up the responsibilities. We also discussed the urgent need to engage our international partners as well as Iraq's diverse groups in supporting the new inclusive Iraq government. And this needs to be at the forefront of every aspect of the global coalition's work. Today, we discussed with President al-Sisi steps that Egypt can and will take with respect to Iraq. And I'm very pleased to say that today, Prime Minister Abadi, the new Prime Minister of Iraq, announced that they are taking some very specific steps to minimize the potential for any civilian casualties as they take on ISIL in populated areas. On Monday, Foreign Minister Shukri, Secretary General Al-Arabi, and I will meet again in Paris for the International Conference on Peace and Security in Iraq. And there we will continue our work to move the coalition forward. Almost every country has an ability to play some kind of a role in this fight against ISIL and to join this coalition one way or the other. And we are committed to working with nations in every corner of the globe to figure out in what way they can constructively contribute to the effort to push back against terrorism. The bottom line is that terrorists like ISIL have no place in the modern world. But it's up to the world to enforce that truth. Engaging the global community of nations in that effort is our goal in Paris, and it will be our goal at the United Nations General Assembly in several different events that will focus on Iraq and on ISIL and on foreign fighters. And it will be our goal, I am convinced, from our meetings today and over the last week, it will be our goal in every meeting that we have on the international basis, together, working to degrade and ultimately to defeat ISIL, wherever it exists. Thank you.
هناخد سؤال وسؤال. هنبدأ بالأستاذ السويسي جنيدي من الأهرام العربي.
شكرا. سؤالي لسيادة الوزير جون كيري وبعد كده سؤالي لسيادة الوزير سامح شكري. سؤالي لسيادة الوزير جون كيري، العلاقات المصرية الأمريكية شهدت ربما صعود وهبوط خلال الفترة الأخيرة، فما هي رؤية الولايات المتحدة لتلك العلاقات وآفاقها ومستقبلها، وهل ما زال الطابع الاستراتيجي موجود في تلك العلاقات أم تم التغيير؟ سؤالي لسيادة الوزير سامح شكري، مصر بتعود بدور إقليمي قوي في الفترة الأخيرة، ولكن هناك اجتماعات تتم دوليا في عدد من الدول الأوروبية، هناك اجتماعات ستتم في الأمم المتحدة، فما هي رؤية مصر لما يحدث والجهود الدولية بالنسبة لليبيا والعراق ومكافحة الإرهاب؟ شكرا.
Do you want me to go first?
Please.
Well, thank you for the question. As I think you know, I served in the United States Senate for 29 years. And many times as a senator, I came here to Egypt, to Cairo. So for many years, I have had a sense of the importance of Egypt. Egypt is 1/4 of the population of the Arab world. And as I said in my comments a moment ago, Egypt is a cultural and intellectual center, as well as a critical leader with respect to this part of the world, and obviously with its history, carries great importance on a global basis. Egypt has been going through an enormous transition itself in these last few years. Most importantly, the people of Egypt have had a chance to vote and define their future. And President al-Sisi is now trying to work hard to implement that future, and the United States wants this government to succeed because its success is important to the region, important to all Egyptians, obviously, and important to the world. Egypt is an ally and important partner in regional security. Egypt had the courage to make peace years ago with Israel, and that brought great pain and suffering to Egypt, but it was a courageous act. It was the right thing to do. And today, Egypt is helping to broker a ceasefire, to make peace, a leader for stability and for the region. So we have great hopes that this economic transition, this cultural, this political transition taking place will grow in its dimensions. President al-Sisi reaffirmed to me today the commitment of Egypt to hold the parliamentary elections, the importance of moving forward on any number of fronts to stabilize, to attract capital, to bring business in, to create jobs, and to focus on the real business of governing. The United States will work with Egypt in that process because of our long-standing friendship and importance. And yes, sometimes friends have a disagreement over one thing or another, but friends also understand the roots of their relationship and the reason for continuing to work for those things that are of common interest, and that's exactly what the United States and Egypt will continue to do.
فيما يتعلق بالدور المصري، مصر بالتأكيد بتطلع بمسؤوليتها لتحقيق الاستقرار بمنطقة الشرق الأوسط وتحقيق الاستقرار والأمن الدولي، فهذا يؤدي إلى تحقيق مصلحة مباشرة للأمن القومي المصري، وأيضا يعبر عن إرادة الشعب المصري في خلق إطار يستطيع أن يستجيب لاحتياجاته التنموية وطموحاته للمستقبل وبناء دولة عصرية ديمقراطية تتفاعل بشكل إيجابي في محيطها الإقليمي والدولي. الاجتماعات التي حضرتها مصر مؤخرا في جدة لوضع تصور وتوافق فيما بين شركاء لمقاومة الإرهاب ومقاومة تنظيم داعش، لأنه مصر طالما كانت داعية إلى ضرورة تكاتف المجتمع الدولي بشكل وثيق لمناهضة هذا التطرف وهذا الأعمال الإرهابية التي تتخذ من الإسلام غطاء، وهي في حقيقة الأمر بتسعى إلى تحقيق مكاسب سياسية وتتخذ من الأساليب العسكرية والأساليب الوحشية ما لا يمكن أن يكون متواكب مع متطلبات أو العصر أو مصلحة الشعوب المنطقة. فنحن ندعم كل الجهود الدولية لمكافحة الإرهاب ونعمل على دعم هذه الجهود واتخاذ من الإجراءات التي تؤدي إلى القضاء على هذه الظاهرة بشكل كامل، سواء كانت في العراق، في ليبيا، في أي أرجاء من أرجاء العالم العربي أو بصفة عامة في القارة الأفريقية. في الشأن الليبي سوف يعقد يوم 17 في مدريد اجتماع لدول جوار ليبيا والدول الشركاء الأوروبيين، أيضا للنظر في الإطار السياسي اللي وضعته مصر واعتمدته دول الجوار لإيجاد حل سياسي للأزمة في ليبيا يجنب الشعب الليبي الأخطار المرتبطة باستمرار العمليات العسكرية. فنأمل أن يكون هذا الاجتماع أيضا يؤدي إلى مصلحة الشعب الليبي ويدفع الأطراف المتصارعة إلى اللجوء إلى الحلول السياسية، وفي نفس الوقت يكون داعم للشرعية المتمثلة في مجلس النواب الليبي، الحكومة الليبية، لأن هذه الشرعية هي الوحيدة التي تعبر عن إرادة الشعب الليبي من خلال الانتخابات التي عقدت والتي كانت مراقبة والتي يعترف المجتمع الدولي بها. ونأمل أن يكون في هذا الدعم ما يؤدي إلى استعادة الشعب الليبي والمؤسسات الليبية لقدراتها على الإدارة مستقبل ليبيا في الفترة القادمة.
هناخد سؤال من جيسون from Reuters.
My first question is for Mr. Foreign Minister. Is there any evidence of Islamic State or ISIL linking up with Ansar, either through teaching or other forms of cooperation, and is this a concern? And just have a follow-up. From your perspective, should the coalition against ISIL be broadened out, or be limited to Sunni Arabs? Should it include Iran? And sorry, one last follow-up question for Mr. Secretary. You keep raising human rights issues, and Egypt's leaders keep disregarding you, most notably when 3 Al Jazeera journalists were jailed a day after you called for their release. Isn't it clear the Egyptians are disregarding your concerns because they understand you want their cooperation in counterterrorism?
فيما يتعلق بالجزء الأول من السؤال المرتبط بالعلاقات بين التنظيمات الإرهابية، فنحن بالتأكيد بنرصد هذه العلاقة فيما بين التنظيمات المختلفة، وللنهاية فهذا الفكر من الناحية الأيديولوجية هو فكر مرتبط على مختلف الصور المتمثلة في هذه التنظيمات، ولا نتصور أن هناك فرق، وإن كان ربما فرق تكتيكي فيما بين هذه المنظمات وكيف تصور نفسها إلى المجتمع الدولي، ولكن في نهاية الأمر فهذا الفكر المتطرف، الفكر الإقصائي، متسق في توجهات كافة المنظمات الإرهابية، والعلاقات التعاون فيما بينها علاقات نرصدها ونرى فيها خطورة أنها تعبر حدود الدولة وتعمل على دحر فكرة الكيان القومي في الأوطان والعمل على إزالة هذه الدول من أجل أن يسود هذا الفكر المتطرف الإقصائي. وأيضا نتصور أنه هذا العمل والقضاء على الإرهاب هو مسؤولية جماعية لكافة أعضاء المجتمع الدولي، لابد أن نتخذ خطوات أكيدة وصادقة لهذا الهدف، بمنع كافة صور التمويل، بمنع التواصل بأي شكل من الأشكال مع هذه التنظيمات، أو العمل على الأفكار الخاصة بالقدرة على احتواء مثل هذه التنظيمات. فلا بد أن يكون هناك تفاهم وتوافق فيما بين أعضاء المجتمع الدولي للقضاء على هذه الظواهر في أي مكان كانت.
Let me be clear, the United States doesn't ever trade its concern for human rights for any other objective. It is always a concern, it's an honest concern, and we had a frank discussion today about concerns that have been expressed. I believe that President al-Sisi and Foreign Minister Shukri and others are well aware of concerns that have been expressed and are, in fact, working at a number of things, including reviewing the demonstration law and other things that have been expressed as part of those concerns. Now, just as in the United States we have a separation of powers, so they have a separation of powers here with an independent judiciary. I am personally confident that over the course of the next weeks, months, days, on an appropriate schedule that is controlled by Egyptians, not by me or anybody else complaining, that issues will be addressed as they ought to be. And I'm confident that this is a concern shared by this government, and let's just see how things play out in the months and days ahead.